You were never meant to be emotionally available to everyone. Not because you should be heartless, but because being too open makes you a target. The world doesn't reward kindness. It exploits it. And if you've been feeling drained, overlooked, and used, it's not your fault. It's your lack of strategy. You were raised to believe that kindness is a virtue, that being emotionally available makes you a better person, that saying yes when you mean no is noble. They told you that warmth would bring you connection, that understanding others would make you feel understood. But they forgot to tell you the rest. This wasn't just a lesson you picked up along the way. It was a script written for you before you even knew how to hold a pen. Maybe you were the quiet child, the one who didn't ask for much. Maybe you learned to read the room better than anyone else. You sensed tension, so you softened your voice. You felt anger, so you swallowed it. You became a peacekeeper, even in wars you didn't start. And over time, you forgot the sound of your own truth. Every time someone said, "You're so mature for your age," you smiled. But deep down, you whispered, "Then why do I feel so old?" Every time someone praised your patience, "You're such a good listener." You nodded. But inside, something asked, "When will someone listen to me?" You became the emotional shelter for everyone else. But no one noticed when the roof started leaking over you. Because you trained them not to. You trained them to expect you to be okay, to be available, to be calm, to be understanding. And now, you don't know how to be anything else. But here's the quiet, devastating truth. What they called kindness was really your fear of rejection. What they praised as selflessness was your desperate hope that someone would finally see you. You don't need to stop being kind. You just need to stop abandoning yourself every time someone else feels uncomfortable. Because kindness without boundaries isn't love. It's quiet betrayal. And it's happening every time you disappear to keep someone else comfortable. Here's what no one wants to admit. If you want to survive in this world with your peace intact, you have to learn to pull away, not because you're angry, not because you want revenge, but because staying too close to people who don't value your presence will bleed you dry. And they'll still expect more. You don't need to become cruel, but you do need to become cold. And what does cold really mean? It means silence, where you used to beg, distance, where you used to chase, stillness, where you used to collapse just to keep others comfortable. Cold is clarity. It is not a rejection of feeling. It's the refusal to leak those feelings into places that have never held you with care. You think you're being kind, but the truth is, you're being used. Not always maliciously, sometimes just conveniently. You've trained people to treat you like an emotional service they didn't have to earn. That's the uncomfortable truth. You thought love was access, but what you gave wasn't love. It was your energy, your stability, your soul, on demand. And now you wonder why you feel exhausted, resentful, invisible. Because you've built relationships where your value is tied to your availability. Not your truth, not your needs, just your presence. And presence, without limits, becomes background noise. You think detachment is cruel? No. Detachment is mercy for the part of you that's been screaming to be protected. Start listening. There's a voice inside you, faint but growing louder, that keeps asking, why do you keep offering yourself to people who would never bleed for you? And that voice is not bitterness. It's your boundaries coming alive. Let them call you distant. Let them call you cold. Because if staying warm means setting yourself on fire to keep others from feeling the chill, you'll never survive your own kindness. If you don't choose detachment, life will choose it for you. But it won't be clean. It won't be conscious. It'll happen slowly, like erosion. Quiet, undeniable, permanent. It'll come in waves. A conversation that leaves you feeling small. A favor that goes unthanked. Another day of showing up for people who wouldn't notice if you disappeared. And then it happens. You'll start laughing less, sleeping less, caring less. Not because you've grown cold, but because you've been overheated for too long. You burned so hard for others that you melted your own shape. You'll feel it in small moments. When you read a message and your chest tightens. When someone says, "You're always there for me," and you want to scream, "But where were you when I couldn't breathe?" But you won't scream. You'll swallow it, like you always do. Because speaking your truth would make them uncomfortable. And you were taught to avoid that at all costs. You were taught to bleed beautifully, to suffer quietly, to turn your exhaustion into a virtue. You call it strength, but your nervous system calls it war. You wake up tired, even after sleep. You feel guilty when you rest. You apologize for taking up space in rooms you helped build. And still, you stay. Because the fear of being alone is louder than the ache of being unseen. But here's the raw truth no one tells you. You're already alone. Alone in a room full of people who take and call it love. Alone in a body that hasn't been listened to in years. Alone in a life that looks fine on the outside, but feels like drowning in still water. And you wonder, how did I get here? When did my needs become negotiable? Why does love feel like debt? The answer is this: because you never taught the world how to value you. You taught it how to use you. You gave. They took. And now you're empty, blaming yourself for a wound you never caused. That's the cost of staying the same. You don't just lose energy. You lose identity. You forget what it feels like to be held, heard, and honored, not for what you offer, but for who you are in silence. You don't need to become heartless. You just need to become untouchable, not cold from trauma, but cool with clarity, not detached from pain, but anchored so deeply that pain no longer pulls you apart. This is what strategic detachment truly is. Presence without participation. Awareness without attachment. Love without losing yourself. It means you can care and still say no. You can help and still walk away. You can feel everything and still choose peace over chaos. Because you've learned, not every cry deserves your response. Not every apology deserves your forgiveness. Not every invitation is worth your energy. You don't cut people off in rage. You cut them off in silence, because you finally understand what it costs you to stay connected to what depletes you. And suddenly, everything shifts. You walk into rooms and no longer over-explain. You listen without the urge to fix. You watch chaos swirl around you and feel still inside. People notice, but they don't know what changed. You became quiet, unreachable, grounded. Not because you stopped caring, but because you finally started caring about yourself. This is what real strength looks like. Not yelling, not defending, not proving. Just removing yourself from the places where your presence became an emotional transaction. You no longer need to be understood. You no longer need to be liked. Because for the first time, you are no longer available for pain you didn't choose. You no longer fight for respect. You radiate it. And the beauty is, you're not doing it to get anything. You're doing it to finally stop giving everything. Because now, you've become a locked fortress in the middle of a storm. Still, unshaken. Not because the winds have stopped, but because the walls were rebuilt with everything you used to waste. Every ignored boundary, every second chance you shouldn't have given, every apology you didn't owe. Now they're stone, unclimbable, unapologetic. There's no sign on the door, no explanation, no open invitation, just silence, just stillness, just presence. And they feel it, even if they won't say it. They circle you now, more careful, more distant. They knock, but not with the same confidence as before, because something's changed. The lock isn't broken anymore. You fixed it. And what's behind it? Stillness, clarity, power. The version of you they were never meant to know. You've become unreadable, not in a way that pushes people away, but in a way that forces them to look inward and ask themselves why they feel so uneasy when they can't control you. Because mystery makes people confront their own noise. You're not cold because you're angry. You're cold because you're guarded. You're protected. You're centered. You've become a mirror that reflects only truth. And not everyone is ready to see their own reflection. So you give them nothing. No expression, no weakness, no access. Only silence, only presence, only the weight of a soul no longer for sale. And now, finally, you walk without needing to be seen. You speak without needing to be heard. You exist without needing to be explained. You've become unreadable. And in that unreadability, you've become free. You are no longer who you were. You're not the one who rushes to fix what isn't yours. Not the one who stays just to keep someone else from feeling uncomfortable. Not the one who explains yourself into exhaustion. Not the one who gives love like oxygen, free, infinite, expected. That version of you, it died in silence. And it didn't scream. It let go quietly because it knew survival was not enough. Something stronger took its place. Not louder, not meaner, just unreachable. You've become cold, but not cruel, because cold means controlled. Cold means your peace is no longer public property. Cold means you've stopped offering emotional luxury to those who paid nothing for it. You've become sovereign. You no longer orbit around other people's moods. You no longer check the room before deciding how to feel. You no longer perform emotional labor just to be perceived as kind. You don't need to explain. You don't need to soften. You don't need to stay. You choose. You detach. You walk. And now, your silence isn't absence. It's architecture, the design of someone who finally built themselves from the inside out. You speak less, not because you have nothing to say, but because peace has become too precious to waste on noise. You walk slower, not because you're lost, but because power never rushes. And when someone demands to know what changed, you look them in the eye and say nothing, because what changed was everything. You no longer ask, will they like me? Now you ask, does this deserve my presence? Does this earn my energy? Does this reflect who I've become? And those are the questions of someone who has returned to their throne. Not bitter, not broken, but free. So now I'll ask you, are you ready to be misunderstood, misread, even feared? If it means never being used again, are you ready to walk away without a word and let your silence say, you'll never get that version of me again? Then your journey isn't over, because the next question is even harder. Can you still love without fear? Can you care deeply without collapsing? Can you stay open without becoming exposed? Can you love without becoming less of yourself? If you're ready to answer that, watch the next video. The Secret to Loving Without Fear, Carl Jung.